or whiskey. Okay, let me check my notes. I think those are all the sounds. Let me see. Okay, that is correct. So now let me tell you what's going on with the glottal stop right here and with the alveolar tap right here. These are alternatives to the t sound. Now, if I say pie and apple, time and get, cake and echo, in the first word we have a voiceless, that means not voiced, plosive, right? Pie, time, cake. But it's pronounced with a strong aspiration. You can feel a lot of air come out. You say pie, time, cake. That's when the sound is at the beginning of a word in American English. Then when the sound is in the middle of a word or at the end, there's no strong aspiration. For example, apple, attack, and or get, and echo. It's not a very strong aspiration. There's a little bit of it, but not a very strong one like in cake or time or pie. Okay, so we have already two alternatives for the T sound. You have time and get. Time, strong aspiration, get, a lot. There's a little bit of aspiration, but not that much. Now, what about the word adventure? Sure, it's spelled with a T, but in that case, the sound really is the affricate, alveolar affricate, ch, right? Adventure. So far we have three alternatives for the T sound. We have t, time, get, or ch, adventure. But there are two more. There are two more alternatives in American English. We can have actually an alveolar tap. For example, butter, right? Butter. That's not really a T. It's a slightly different sound. Butter, for example. Sometimes the T is not pronounced, like internet. That's another story. Or 20. And sometimes the T, when the T is at the end of a word, for example, it's pronounced as a glottal stop with an alveolar gesture. What does this mean? This is what's also called an unreleased stop. A stop is another term for a plosive, right? So, what happens? When you say a word like get, for example, an American will sometimes say get, and sometimes they will say get. Now, what's the difference? You can't hear the T, can you? Well, that's because it's not pronounced like a T. It's pronounced differently. Basically, the tongue touches the hard palate, but then you don't release the tongue. So there's no explosion sound, no sudden release of air. You leave your tongue there and you close off the flow of air with your glottis. You pronounce a glottal stop. Let me give you an example of a glottal stop in another word. Try saying the word uh-oh, uh-oh, uh-oh. I guess we're screwed. Uh-oh. Between the and the o, there's a glottal stop. The flow of air is stopped in the throat, in your glottis. You say uh-oh. This is what happens with a word with a T at the end. For example, get. Sometimes an American English speaker will say get. That's a T with no strong aspiration. And sometimes he will say get, which is basically a glottal stop accompanied by placing the tongue against the hard palate, like as if you were going to pronounce a full but not quite. So those are the 6 ways to pronounce the T in American English, either silent, like in internet, aspirated, like in time, unaspirated, like in get, as a glottal stop, as in get, or as an alveolar tap, like in butter, along with all the other sounds of American English, with a few examples for each. I hope you found this at least mildly interesting. I don't know how I'm doing on time. I might have to cut this video in two. But either way, I hope you've found this interesting, especially if you are. I hope if you're a native speaker that you've found it interesting. I hope if you're learning English that you've found it useful. Maybe you're still struggling with some of these pronunciations. I will come back to this topic in the future, probably in the near future. Either way, I would love to hear questions or comments. Please don't hesitate to ask any questions about what I've just said. I know I've rambled and I know I've gone through this kind of complex subject very quickly. But um, take this as a brief introduction, and don't hesitate to tell me about any questions or comments you might have. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.